Hi everyone. This talk is called Black Lives in the Sticks, Caribbean Northants and Deurbanizing Blackness in the Media Archive, 1948 to 1985. Um, this did inspire a book chapter as well. So if you're interested in the book chapter, you'll find the links to that in the description of this video too. The novelist and critic Raymond Williams observe that research topics are always linked to personal stories. He did not think of this as negative. If you look at the topic, you'll always see the researcher. So personal reasons often animate research, and to exclude that from our thoughts can take away something. In 1973, his book The Country and the City was published. As a Cambridge scholar, he saw that what was being taught there about rural life did not match his experiences of the countryside in Wales. Similarly, what I'm going to see as representative, so-called, of post-war Caribbean histories in academic publishing, films, TV, documentary, and popular literature is really a story eclipsed by Black people in London, which is a contradiction to my family history in Northamptonshire and many, many others as well. My PhD research uses over 100 hours of original interviews to tell a history of post-war Caribbean communities in Northamptonshire, where my own family came to Northampton in the Midlands from the parish of St. John on the Caribbean island of Grenada from the early 60s. And I combine those interviews with other sources like the news media from the time as well, and also interviews done by Northants Black History Association in an earlier project. This paper was grounded in historian Michel Rolfe-Trio's ideas of historical production, where he talks about films, TV, and other sites as archives of producing historical narratives. Here, so-called Black British media have largely done focused on Black people in London and other port cities like Bristol and Liverpool, showing how city narratives become an archive of where history is produced, consecrated and naturalized, much to the exclusion of non-city Black experiences. So the city has become canonized within the official Black British history. Here, the rules of whiteness as sameness have been applied to Black Britishness, where the city has become an uncontested default or the norm, including the mainstreaming of Windrush. Cultural texts such as Steve McQueen's Small Axe and Andrea Levy's Small Island follow in the footsteps of other works, films like Babylon, Pressure, Burning an Illusion, and Young Soul Rebels come attached to books like The Lonely Londoners, To Sir with Love, and many others. Modern day films and TV dramas about Black people are two narratives that tether Black identities with the city. For example, films like Rocks, set in London, disrupt or problematize, Black children when they find themselves in the coastal village of Hastings and forced to promptly return to London where they belong. If we think of the screen as a site of historical production, where public perceptions of Windrush and otherwise British Black Caribbean communities are produced, onus on London and other cities effectively tells us that there is a city idea maintained by white media and publishing at the expense of non-cities, so the towns and the countryside. There is a whole canon of popular Black television that talks about London as if it's the center of the universe. Everything from Michaela Cowell's May I Destroy You to the recent series Dreaming Whilst Black, and even more recently, Queenie. This arrives in addition to the more historical Windrush era narratives. For myself, my family, and many of the people I've grown up with, a lot of these texts lamented as cornerstones of representation do not speak for us, having been socialized in provincial England. If you happen to be Black in English towns or the villages, or even Black in Wales, Scotland, or Ireland, so-called Black British film or TV may not speak for you. My conceptualization of Blackness and the Caribbean culture I grew up in has more in common with what Corinne Fowler talks about within her book, The Green and Pleasant Land, that than the concrete jungles of Notting Hill or Brixton that are observable in the numerous articulations of Windrush across film, TV, and popular literature like novels. Corinne Fowler discusses this idea of close-knit rural communities as key to the concept of the rural ideal. Communities, no less, when dubbed rural, are a motive that include mutually beneficial human relationships, voluntary labour, investment in local affairs, neighbourliness. The neighbour is therefore a potent figure of belonging. This concept of a rural community connected with a collective nostalgia for rural spaces, which exist as outsider multiracial Britain, she says. So when my great-grandparents, Toyley and Edison Noel, arrived in Northampton in the 1960s, what they saw would have been a small town surrounded by fields. Indeed, when Winston Nelson, a Jamaican RAF pilot during the war, came here in 1948, he married a white woman and raised a mixed family in the 50s and 60s. This directly challenges the notions depicted on popular television of what Windrush is or what it can be. In fact, when you go out into the provincial areas, the idea of a black presence over a black community become more visible. And though Northamptonshire did have Caribbean social clubs, Caribbean cricket teams, and even certain sections of Northampton and Wellingborough, at least that there were black communities, Abington and Northampton, and the Queensway estate, at least towards the late 60s onwards in Wellingborough. These were places that did not exist in the void that also included Indians from the 70s as well. Black people lived among white people lived among each other and us, and Indians and other South Asian groups lived among us too. In the 60s, there was an Indian guy in Northampton that everybody called Peter. I do not think that was his name. And he sold Caribbean food in the Mounts. There was also an Irish woman called, a Scottish woman called Mrs. Geddes, who owned a shop on Victoria Road. Many Caribbean people used as well. If there's anything that separates Northamptonshire, then the current way the London story is told, it is the lack of inclusion of cricket in London. Cricket to West Indians living in England during the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s was cherished, pertinently when the West Indies team started winning so consistently. Northampton had their own Caribbean team also, who were as good locally as the West Indies were internationally. Out in the Midlands, we are not short of cricket fields due to our proximity to the countryside, and the team United Social played many of the village teams, as they did national club teams and other local teams here, even out in London as well, but also in Leeds, Huddersfield, and many others. What we do not see in media representations is how many Caribbean communities were connected to each other due to cricket or proximity to a cricket club. Though cricket is played in London, it is seen as a countryside sport, but it was played widely in the Windrush era in this country and in the Caribbean. Representations of Black lives in the sticks are not in the popular mainstream, but they are there. Series 7 of Father Brown includes a Trinidadian butcher in Kembleford, a fictional village in the Gloucestershire Cotswolds during the 50s. Likewise, the Father Brown spin-off, The Sister Boniface Mysteries, is led by Sister Boniface, a nun that solves crimes like her priest counterpart, Father Brown, and also a black officer from Bermuda. Series 5 of the Inspector Morse spin-off, Endeavour, also includes Windrush visibility in 1960s Oxfordshire, as does the Series 8 premiere. Though not Caribbean, the recent Agatha Christie adaptation of Murder is Easy has a black Nigerian lead in a murder mystery set in the fictional village Witchwood under Ash, presumably a fictionalization of the Oxfordshire Ascot under Witchwood. Cricket as a method of building black communities is not something that has been effectively explored in film and television archive. But this is a narrative that is very common when you begin to follow the trajectories of blackness outside of the city. The mainstream focus on London stops us from really exploring what other black communities were doing, further to other individual Caribbean people and other black people that went and settled in very white spaces. as we know from histories of Black American GIs that had children with white women during the Second World War. So when we begin to look outside of London's borders, even to minor cities, we begin to see blackness very differently to the mainstream. So my PhD tracks some of this in Northamptonshire, where a mix between town and the rural saw many black people doing things that in media have been attributed to white people. The types of freedom black children had playing out on the streets in the 50s is akin to depictions of childhood in districts of East London like Poplar and Call the Midwife. Even though that program is set in London, it's almost like London other. It's very quaint and unbuilt up, and everyone is nice to each other, much in the lens of what Fowler describes in The Green and Pleasant Land. Likewise, to have blues parties and sound system in Northants, as we did, runs juxtaposed to films like Babylon. That saw the sound system reggae culture as intimately connected with urban geographies of London. In Northamptonshire, there would be reggae sound clashes with other local sounds, further to the fact there would be holiday trips to the coast where Northants sounds would meet with other Caribbean communities and have battle for sounds like in coastal places like Margate. The way media and publishing have pushed London views of blackness as representative for everyone does not work for me. We have other histories of provincial England, but also Scotland and Wales and Ireland in general that have many similar and contradictory narratives worth talking about. My PhD about Northamptonshire has similarities with London, but also differences, from the music scenes all the way up to discussions of employment and Caribbean workers in the shoe industry. Northampton also had Teddy Boys, fascist skinheads, and the National Front. The first black self-help organisation in this country was also in Northampton, Matafan Cantor, which I'll link in the description as well to my lecture on that, and on screen. And this was all happening in the sticks, relatively, in contrast to what was going on in bigger black communities in cities, and did inspire other groups into self-help as well, such as the Punjabi guys in Leicester that spotted the Moat Boys School around 1982-83. If we think about film and TV as an archive, we can confirm that interest audiences are being sold an incomplete narrative of Windrush, along with publishing, since university publications and university presses are not the only places where history is produced. Michel Rolfe-Trio's discussion of erasure in historical production is an inappropriate site to discuss the term Black British as a misnomer. What we have is Black London, England at best, but not really, enforced by the screen, media, and publishing. The erasure of provincial England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland from the official history of Black Caribbean communities and Black Caribbean presence in the Windrush era is appropriate for that discussion. Truro writes, "We are all amateur historians with various degrees of awareness about our production, learning history from similar amateurs. Universities and university presses are not the only producers of the historical narrative. Most Europeans and North Americans learn their history through media that has not been subjected to the standards set by higher education. Long before non-academics read the historians who set the standards, to colleagues and students, they access their history through celebrations, site and museum visits. So for me in the Midlands, it was Warwick Castle and sites like that. Films, so think about period dramas as well. National holidays, so Thanksgiving in the US context, um, and primary school books as well. I hope this talk has been interesting to you, and if it has, leave a comment leave a comment as well. So thanks very much, and social media handles are here as well.